My girlfriend announced. I'm converting to veganism, and so are you. I'm throwing out everything in your fridge. I said, your body, your choice. Then I changed my apartment door code while she was at yoga, moved her to a storage unit, and texted her the unit number. I, 29M, am a pretty straightforward guy who values routine, personal space, and mutual respect above just about everything else. I work as a data analyst, which basically means I spend my entire day looking at patterns, finding anomalies, and solving problems based on hard evidence. I don't do well with chaos, and I have absolutely zero tolerance for manipulation. I own a nice 3-bedroom condo in a quiet, heavily wooded suburb just outside the city. I worked incredibly hard to buy it, and it is my absolute sanctuary. For about 8 months, I had been dating a woman I will just call girlfriend 27F. When we first met, she was charming, highly energetic, and had this magnetic personality that just pulled people right into her orbit. She worked in social media marketing and was completely obsessed with curating the perfect lifestyle aesthetic for her followers. At first, I actually found her ambition really attractive. We had very different interests, obviously. I prefer spending my weekends smoking meats in the backyard, hiking, or working on my car, while she preferred brunching at trendy spots, making content, and attending high-end wellness retreats. They always say opposites attract, and for a while, it really seemed to work. But right around the 6-month mark, the patterns began to shift. The anomalies started appearing in her behavior. Girlfriend's lease at her own apartment across town was coming up for renewal in a few months, and she started complaining constantly about her landlord, the neighborhood, and the plumbing in her building. One evening, she casually suggested that she should stay at my place for a few weeks while her building underwent some mandatory pipe replacements. She didn't really ask me, either. She stated it as a logistical necessity. I agreed, assuming it was just a temporary arrangement to help her out. She brought over 2 large suitcases the next day. By the end of the first week, she had brought over 5 more boxes, a massive ring light, her entire desktop computer setup, and a giant collection of decorative healing crystals. She was slowly and methodically moving in, without actually having the adult conversation about moving in together. The entitlement crept in like a slow leak in a ceiling. It started with really small demands. First, she asked me to stop leaving my work boots by the front door because they ruined the feng shui and the aesthetic of the entryway. Then, she demanded I clear out half my home office so she could have a dedicated filming space for her social media content. When I politely declined, explaining that my office contained sensitive client data and multiple monitors that are strictly essential for my job, she sulked and gave me the silent treatment for 3 solid days. The dynamic was rapidly shifting from a partnership to a dictatorship. But I kept the peace, waiting for her building's supposedly massive plumbing issues to be resolved so she could return her own space. Then came the Saturday morning that changed absolutely everything. It was 8 a.m. I had been awake since dawn, prepping a massive 12-pound brisket. My best friend was driving into town later that week, and we had a long-standing tradition of doing a huge backyard barbecue to kick off the weekend. I had just finished applying the dry rub and was setting up the smoker on the back patio when girlfriend walked into the kitchen. She was dressed in immaculate, matching athletic wear, holding a mason jar filled with some dark green liquid. She watched me wash my hands at the sink, her expression entirely unreadable and cold. "We need to talk," she said, leaning against the kitchen island. "Sure," I replied, grabbing a paper towel. "What's up?" "I had a massive breakthrough during my meditation session last night," she announced, her voice carrying that practiced, authoritative tone she always used in her videos. "I am converting to veganism. I can no longer allow the energy of death and suffering into my body. That's a really big step," I said calmly, genuinely trying to be supportive. "Good for you. I know you've been talking about a dietary change for a while now." She stared at me, her eyes narrowing just a fraction. "You aren't listening. I am converting to veganism, and so are you." I paused, tossing the paper towel into the trash can. "I appreciate the inclusion, but no, I'm not. I enjoy my diet, and I have no intention of changing it." She stepped forward, pointing a manicured finger directly at my stainless steel refrigerator. "This isn't a negotiation. I am not living in a space that harbors toxins. I'm throwing out everything in your fridge. It's toxic. The energy is dead. I've already placed a massive grocery delivery order for organic, plant-based staples. When I get back from my yoga retreat this afternoon, this kitchen will be cleansed. I just looked at her. I looked at the refrigerator I had purchased with my own hard-earned money, sitting in the condo I solely owned, filled with groceries I had bought and paid for. The sheer audacity of her statement hung in the air, heavy and completely suffocating. I kept my voice completely level. Your body, your choice. But you aren't touching my food. She let out a sharp, condescending scoff. We are a unit. I am not compromising on my truth. Everything animal-based in this house is going into the complex dumpster at 4 o'clock today. If you want to eat poison, you can do it at a restaurant. But my sanctuary will be purer. Before I could even process a response to that level of delusion, she grabbed her keys, slung her designer gym bag over her shoulder, and marched toward the front door. I'll be at the studio until 3. Have the fridge empty before I get back, or I will do it myself. The front door slammed shut behind her. I stood in the silence of my kitchen, completely stunned. She had just referred to my condo as her sanctuary. She had issued a mandate regarding my property, my food, and my lifestyle, fully expecting me to just bow down to her demands like a servant. I didn't argue. I didn't chase after her down the driveway. I went over to the refrigerator, pulled out a cold bottle of water, and took a long, slow drink. Then I walked right into the living room, sat on the couch, and opened my laptop. If she wanted a cleansed sanctuary, she was going to get one. My very first move was to secure a storage unit. I found a highly rated climate control facility located exactly 2.4 miles away from my condo. I reserved a 10 by 10 unit online, paid the first month's rent in full with my credit card, and digitally signed the rental agreement. Next, I needed boxes. I always keep a surplus of heavy-duty moving boxes and packing tape in my garage from when I moved in. I brought up 20 flat boxes and assembled them right there in the living room. I started in the guest bedroom, which she had essentially claimed as her personal dressing room. As I was folding her clothes and carefully placing them into boxes, I moved over to the small desk where she kept her charging station. Her iPad was sitting there, currently plugged in. As I shifted a stack of her aesthetic notebooks to pack them away, my hand brushed the screen of the tablet. It woke up. It wasn't locked. The screen illuminated brightly, displaying an active group chat on a messaging app. The chat was literally titled The Takeover, featuring girlfriend and 2 of her closest friends. Now, I know snooping is wrong, but given the insane ultimatum I had just received and the aggressive nature of her behavior, self-preservation took over completely. I scrolled up slightly. What I read extinguished any lingering shred of guilt I might have had about what I was about to do to her. The messages from girlfriend read, "Yeah, he's totally going to cave. He hates conflict. I told him I'm purging his fridge today. Once I establish dominance over the kitchen, it'll be so much easier to implement phase 2. One of her friends replied, "Are you still moving her brother in?" Girlfriend, obviously. My brother's lease is up at the end of the month, and he has 0 savings. I'm going to tell him my brother needs the guest room for a few weeks to get back on his feet. Once my brother is in, he's never leaving. He can pay me rent under the table, and I'll use it to fund my content trips. Plus, I need his espresso machine for my morning vlog, so I'm telling him coffee is toxic and taking it to my office. It's literally the perfect setup. I stare at the glowing screen, feeling my heart pounding against my ribs. She wasn't just entitled. She was actively plotting a hostile takeover of my home. She was planning to move her chronically unemployed brother into my condo, charge him rent behind my back, and force me into submission under the guise of dietary enlightenment. She was running a massive con on me. The cold realization sharpened my focus into pure laser precision. The timeline was absolutely critical. It was currently 9:15 a.m. She was scheduled to return at 3 p.m. I went to work. I packed the precision of a military operation. I wrapped her fragile decorative crystals in thick bubble wrap. I carefully dismantled her expensive ring light and packed it securely in its original carrying case. I boxed up her clothes, her makeup, her shoes, her endless bathroom toiletries. I left absolutely nothing behind. I even packed a single strand of hair I found resting on her designated bathroom sink. By 11:30 a.m., her entire existence in my condo had been reduced to 15 neatly stacked, heavily sealed, and labeled boxes sitting right by the front door. I opened the TaskRabbit app on my phone and hired a top-rated man with a van for an immediate emergency job. The driver arrived right at 12:15 p.m. Together, we loaded all 15 boxes into the back of his transit van. I followed him to the storage facility in my own car. We unloaded the boxes, stacking them perfectly inside the clean, climate-controlled unit. Once the van driver was paid, tipped generously, and dismissed, I stood inside the unit alone. I took out my phone and recorded a continuous, unedited video. I documented the pristine condition of the boxes, the secure nature of the facility, and the exact placement of every single item. I verbally stated the date and time on the recording. I stepped out of the unit, pulled down the heavy rolling metal door, and secured it with a heavy-duty, hardened steel combination padlock I had purchased from a hardware store on the way over. I drove back to my condo. It was exactly 1:45 p.m. The silence in the apartment was deafening and profoundly peaceful. It felt like I could finally breathe again. I walked over to the front door. I have a high-end smart lock system installed, which I manage entirely through an app on my phone. I opened the application. I found her profile under the authorized users list. I deleted her fingerprint access. I deleted her personalized keypad code. For good measure, I changed the master code to something entirely new. Then I went straight to the kitchen, poured myself a fresh cup of the supposedly toxic coffee, and sat at my kitchen island. I opened my phone and drafted a text message. Attached is the address for a climate-controlled storage facility. Your unit is number 402. The combination of the padlock is 8-2-4-1. I have paid for the first 30 days. All of your belongings have been carefully packed and secured inside. Do not return to my home. We are done. I attached a photograph of the padlock and the address of the facility. I hit send. Then I opened my security camera app on my tablet and brought up the live feed of the front porch. I propped it up against the sugar bowl and waited. At exactly 3:10 p.m., her sleek white SUV pulled into my driveway. Girlfriend stepped out. She was holding a massive, reusable canvas grocery bag filled to the brim with expensive organic vegetables. She walked up the front steps, radiating absolute self-importance. She reached for the smart lock and pressed her thumb against the biometric scanner. The lock flashed red. A small robotic voice chimed. Access denied. She frowned. She shifted the heavy bag of groceries to her hip and typed in her 4-digit code. Access denied. She typed it again, faster this time, jabbing her manicured fingers aggressively against the glass screen. Access denied. Through the camera feed, I watched her expression morph from mild confusion to deep irritation. She dropped the grocery bag right on the porch and pulled out her phone. A second later, my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. She was calling. I ignored it. It went straight to voicemail. She immediately called again. I ignored it again. I watched her open her messages and read the text I had sent an hour prior. Her eyes widened comically. She stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open, clearly struggling to process the information. Then the irritation vanished entirely, replaced by an explosive, volcanic rage. She began pounding on my heavy wooden door with her closed fists. "Open the door!" she screamed, her shrill voice muffled to the thick wood and insulation. "Open this door right now. What is wrong with you? Open the door." I sat at the kitchen island, quietly sipping my coffee. I didn't move a single muscle. She kept screaming, kicking the base of the door with her expensive sneakers. She was looking around wildly, hoping my neighbors would come out and intervene to save her. Fortunately, my house sits on a large, secluded lot, and my nearest neighbor is separated by a very thick line of mature cedar trees. Nobody was coming to her rescue. After 10 solid minutes of throwing a highly unzen tantrum on my porch, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. She spoke aggressively, pacing back and forth across the wood decking. 20 minutes later, a local police cruiser pulled into my driveway. I took a deep breath. I knew this was a strong possibility, and I was entirely prepared for it. I grabbed a manila folder from my office desk and walked to the front door. I unlocked it manually from the inside and stepped out onto the porch just as two uniformed officers were walking up the front steps. Girlfriend immediately launched into a hysterical, theatrical performance. She pointed directly at me, her voice trembling with perfectly manufactured tears. "Officers," he locked me out. "I live here. He illegally evicted me while I was at a yoga class. He stole all my belongings and threw them out on the street. I am a legal tenant, and he is violating my rights." The older of the two officers held up a hand, looking exhausted. "Okay, ma'am, let's take a breath. Sir, is this your residence?" "Yes, officer," I replied respectfully, keeping my hands visible. "I am the sole owner of this property." "He's lying," she shrieked, stomping her foot. "I live here. We live together." The officer looked at me. "She says she resides here. Have you legally evicted her through the court system?" "Officer," I said calmly, opening my manila folder, "she is not a tenant. She is a guest. Under our state's property code, a guest does not establish legal tenancy until they have continuously resided at the property for 30 days. She moved her bags in on October 1st. Today is October 22nd. She has been staying here for exactly 22 days. I handed the officer a neat stack of printouts. This is the deed to property, in my name only. I have also provided a printout of public utility records and her own active lease agreement. She maintains a legal residence at an apartment complex across town. Her lease that does not expire for another 4 months. She receives absolutely no mail here. She pays 0 rent here. She is a transient guest who overstayed her welcome, and her invitation to be on my property has been officially revoked." The officer reviewed the documents carefully, nodding slowly. He turned to girlfriend. "Ma'am, do you have a piece of mail with this address on it? A utility bill? A driver's license?" She stammered, her fake tears drying up instantly. "No, but my stuff was here. My whole life is here." "Where is her property, sir?" the second officer asked, stepping forward. I safely packed all of her belongings and transported them to a secure, climate-controlled storage facility. I prepaid for a full month of storage. I texted her the exact address, the unit number, and the lock combination. Her property is completely safe, undamaged, and totally accessible to her. I held up my phone, showing the officer the time-stamped text message and the photo of the lock. The older officer handed my documents back to me. He turned to girlfriend, his demeanor shifting from inquisitive to strictly authoritative. "Ma'am, this is a civil matter. Based on the documentation provided in the state laws regarding tenancy, you're legally considered a guest, not a tenant. He has the absolute right to ask you to leave his property. Your property has not been stolen. It has been relocated, and you have full access to it. You have no legal right to enter this home without his permission." "This is ridiculous," she yelled, completely losing her temper. "I know my rights. I am going to sue him for everything he owns. He ruined my life." "You are free to pursue civil action in a courtroom," the officer stated firmly, clearly done with her attitude. "But right now, you need to gather your groceries and leave the premises immediately. If you refuse to leave, or if you return and attempt to gain entry, you will be arrested for criminal trespassing. Do you understand?" She stared at the officer, then shifted her glare to me. The look in her eyes was pure venom. All the fake spirituality, the wellness jargon, the curated soft girl aesthetic, it all melted away in that instant, revealing the deeply entitled, manipulative person underneath. She didn't say another word. She snatched her bag of organic vegetables off the porch, marched down the steps, and got into her SUV. She slammed the door so hard I genuinely thought the glass would shatter, threw the car into reverse, and sped blindly out of my driveway. The officers thanked me for my cooperation, advised me to keep my doors locked and to call them as she returned, and then they left. I went back inside, locked the heavy door, and finally fired up my smoker. The brisket turned out absolutely perfect that weekend. However, I knew someone with her staggering level of entitlement would not just go quietly into the night. The retaliation began almost immediately. Over the next 2 weeks, she launched a relentless campaign of digital harassment. She blocked my phone number, but weaponized her social media following. She posted vague, tearful videos about escaping a toxic, controlling environment and surviving a narcissistic purge. She never used my actual name. She was just smart enough to avoid direct defamation. But anyone who knew us knew exactly who she was talking about. Then, she tried to play really dirty. She attempted to log into my internet service provider account to cancel my Wi-Fi, pretending to be my wife. She tried to reroute my Amazon deliveries to her old apartment. Because I work in data and cybersecurity, I had already changed every single password, enabled two-factor authentication on every account, and locked down my credit the minute she drove away. Her attempts were completely futile, but they proved her malice and gave me excellent digital logs of her IP address trying to breach my accounts. The absolute climax of her entitlement arrived exactly 18 days after the lockout. I walked out to my mailbox after work and found a certified letter waiting for me. I opened it at the kitchen counter. It was a formal summons to appear in small claims court. She was suing me for $10,000, which is the absolute maximum allowable limit in our state's small claims division. I read through the statement of claim, and it was a total masterpiece of creative fiction. She alleged illegal self-help eviction, severe emotional distress, loss of income due to lack of access to filming equipment, and the destruction of high-end, luxury property during an unauthorized and negligent relocation. Specifically, she claimed that during my reckless packing, I had completely destroyed a pristine, limited-edition Chanel handbag valued at $6,500 and a MacBook Pro valued at $2,500. She attached blurry black and white printouts of a heavily scratched laptop and a leather handbag with a massive tear right down the side. She honestly thought she had me cornered. She assumed I would just settle out of court to avoid the hassle, or that a judge would automatically side with a crying, distressed woman over a seemingly aggressive man who threw her out on the street. She vastly underestimated my profession, my patience, and my capacity for absolute, unyielding retribution. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing my case like I was going to Supreme Court. Small claims court does not require attorneys, which meant I would be representing myself. I compiled my evidence. I organized the tenancy laws with highlighted sections. I printed out the text messages from the iPad, but I needed a definitive kill shot regarding the supposedly damaged property. I hired a private investigator. It cost me $450, but it was the best money I ever spent. I gave him her name, her social media handles, and the exact details of the specific Chanel bag she claimed I destroyed. I told him to trace her digital footprint on every luxury consignment and resale marketplace on the entire internet. It took the investigator exactly 4 days to find what I needed. The day of hearing finally arrived in early December. The courtroom was crowded, filled with frustrated people arguing over unpaid contractor bills, bad mechanic jobs, and fender benders. I sat quietly in the back row, wearing a tailored navy suit, holding a single, neatly organized 3-ring binder. Girlfriend arrived looking completely different from her usual glamorous self. Gone was the expensive Lululemon and the flawless, glowing makeup. She wore a modest, slightly oversized beige sweater, minimal makeup, and had her hair tied back in a messy, frizzy bun. She was playing a character, the devastated, broken victim. When our case was finally called, we approached the bench together. The judge was an older woman with incredibly sharp eyes and a strictly no-nonsense demeanor. All right, the judge said, looking over the initial paperwork, plaintiff claims illegal eviction and property damage totaling $10,000. Plaintiff, you may begin your statement. Girlfriend turned on the waterworks immediately. It was honestly impressive. She spoke with a trembling, quiet voice, recounting a harrowing tale of how she came home from a peaceful yoga retreat to find herself locked out, effectively homeless, and terrified for her safety. She claimed I haphazardly threw her priceless belongings into a dirty, rented van, resulting in the total destruction of her designer handbag and her work computer, effectively ruining her livelihood as a creator. The judge listened patiently, taking notes. Do you have evidence of the damaged property, ma'am? Girlfriend presented the photographs. The judge reviewed them, then turned her sharp gaze to me. Defendant, you are accused of illegal eviction and destruction of property. How do you respond to these claims? I stood up straight, projecting my voice clearly and respectfully. Your Honor, I strongly deny all claims. First, regarding the allegation of illegal eviction, I submit to the court Exhibit A, the property deed proving my sole ownership, and Exhibit B, the plaintiff's active lease agreement at a different address. Under state law, the plaintiff was a transient guest who resided at my property for exactly 22 days. She never established legal tenancy. I had the legal right to revoke her invitation to my home at any time. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. The law supports your action regarding the lockout. However, you took possession of her property to move it. You are legally responsible for its care during that transfer. How do you address the extensive damages she is claiming? Your Honor, I said, opening my binder to the next tab. I anticipated that the plaintiff might attempt to falsify a claim against me. Therefore, I documented the entire relocation process. I submit Exhibit C, a USB drive containing continuous, high-definition video footage of the storage unit. In the video, you will clearly see the MacBook Pro in absolutely pristine condition being safely placed into a heavily padded box. You will also see the meticulous care taken with every single item she owned. Girlfriend shifted uncomfortably at her table. A video doesn't prove anything. He could have broken it before he put it in the box. Let him finish, the judge snapped, glaring at her. I pulled out the final piece of evidence, the kill shot. Furthermore, Your Honor, regarding the Chanel handbag, the plaintiff claims I destroyed it on October 14th during the move. I submit Exhibit D. This is a certified report from a licensed private investigator, complete with transaction records, IP addresses, and direct deposit receipts from a luxury consignment website called The Real Real. I handed the thick stack of papers to the bailiff, who promptly handed them up to the judge. Your Honor, those records prove conclusively that the plaintiff sold that exact Chanel handbag, matching the specific serial number provided in her own evidence, on October 2nd. 12 days prior to the incident in question, she received a direct deposit of $4,200 for it. The photographs of the damaged bag she submitted to this court today as evidence were actually lifted from a completed eBay listing from 3 years ago by a seller located in Ohio. The courtroom went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop in the back row. The judge stared at the papers. She looked at the IP address logs. She looked at the transaction receipts. Then, very slowly, she lowered her reading glasses and locked eyes with Girlfriend. Girlfriend was completely frozen in place, her face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of white. The fragile victim persona evaporated instantly, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. Ma'am, the judge said, her voice dangerously low and echoing in the quiet room, are you aware of the penalty for perjury in this state? Girlfriend opened her mouth, but absolutely no sound came out. She looked at me, terrified, then stared down at the floor. You have submitted fraudulent, fabricated evidence to this court, the judge continued, her voice rising in volume with every word. You have attempted to use the legal system to extort $10,000 from the defendant based on completely fabricated damages. This is severe, unacceptable abuse of the judicial process. The judge slammed her gavel down hard. The plaintiff's case is dismissed with extreme prejudice. Before Girlfriend could even turn to run out of the room, I spoke up again. Your Honor, if I may, I have filed a counterclaim. The judge looked at me, her expression softening just a fraction. Proceed. I am countersuing the plaintiff for the cost of the storage unit, the TaskRabbit mover, the private investigator fees, and damages for extreme harassment and attempted interference with my utility accounts, totaling $2,800. I have submitted the receipts and the digital IP logs of her attempts to unlawfully access my personal accounts. The judge didn't even hesitate for a second. She flipped through the back pages of my binder, verifying the receipts and logs. Given the plaintiff's demonstrated lack of credibility and documented malicious, retaliatory actions, the defendant's counterclaim is granted in full. Plaintiff, you are ordered to pay the defendant $2,800 within 30 days, or your wages and bank accounts will be garnished. Furthermore, I am officially forwarding the transcript of this hearing, along with Exhibit D, to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal perjury charges. We are adjourned. The gavel cracked again. It sounded exactly like victory. Girlfriend practically sprinted out of the courtroom, completely humiliated in front of a room full of strangers. She had tried to manipulate me, steal from me, forcefully move her brother into my house, and completely destroy my peace. In the end, her massive entitlement cost her pride, her scheme, and almost $3,000. I received a cashier's check in the mail 28 days later, presumably paid by her parents to keep her from getting her wages garnished. I immediately used the money to buy myself a brand new, absolute top-of-the-line espresso machine. Every single morning, when I make my supposedly toxic negative energy coffee, I am reminded of the immense value of setting hard boundaries and refusing to negotiate with entitled, manipulative people. The whole insane incident forced me to really evaluate who I let into my life and my space. It taught me that while compassion and patience are great virtues, blind trust is a massive liability. You just can't compromise your own sanctuary to accommodate someone else's delusion. My home remained my fortress, entirely vegan mandate-free, and most importantly, completely free of her. So if you enjoyed reading about deeply entitled people getting exactly what they deserve in a court of law, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's completely free, highly plant-based, and legally binding.